Okay. And when they get done, I'll process the video. It takes a little bit of time, and I'll get it posted. I haven't decided if I'm posting it here or if I'm posting it on, I have a YouTube site set up and stuff. Just out of curiosity, how many of you were able to get R and RStudio installed and running? Oh, fantastic. Okay, awesome. I was going to say, if you didn't, you're welcome to just sit back and listen and then try again. And just individually later, if you guys have problems or it gacks on you partway through, we might end a little bit early, and then I can try to help people individually, or you can call me and we can sit down one-on-one. Okay. So, like I said, this is my website. If you click on the teaching, you get links to the stuff that I'm putting together for this fall. But there's a couple other things out here. I did do a series of these workshops last spring. And when I did them last spring, I really started from bare bones, like started with just really basic R programming. And it wasn't until I got to the fourth workshop that I started talking about the reproducible research piece, and people were like, oh, I wish you had done that first. So that's why this fall I'm sort of starting there. But there's a link here to a book that I've been putting together, and this was just really a dump of all the materials from those workshops that I did this past spring. So I encourage you guys to take a look at that as well. You can actually download the whole thing in PDF and carry it around, print it if you want. If you click read, you can read this online, and I won't say I've exhaustively tested it, but it works fairly well on mobile devices. So you're welcome to play around with this. This is just as is, buyer beware. It's not totally fixed. And I never did completely document all the stuff down here for workshops 3 and 4, but the first two have a lot of materials in it to help you. So this has information on sort of getting set up. So those of you that have at least gotten things installed, you're probably past all of this. But this link here about places to learn R and get additional help is really useful. So that first link is that Code School Try R. And that's what this is. So when you get there, this is actually done by O'Reilly, which has a lot of fantastic books and things for software and programming. And when you go through it, if you sign in and create an account, you can track your progress. You get these cute little badges as you complete each module. You don't have to do that. But if you click on one, it'll actually walk you through and say, let's get started. You click continue and says, oh, okay, let's type an expression. And it'll come back and say, yay, you did great. Let's go to the next one. And it'll just literally walk you through. And so at least you kind of get the feel for what it's like to interact and what the R interface looks like. So everything you do here, you could do back using inside the R software interface. Some other places. How many of you guys have ever heard of Data Camp? A few. So Data Camp has a bunch of different things. They have all kinds of software and different things, and they have a whole thing here for learning R. Any of you guys doing any of the genetics, bioinformatics? Anybody here using bioconductor for anything? A few. The reason I mention that, if you're doing anything with biomarkers and some of the genetic processing software, some of those are actually written in Python, so just FYI. There's some written in R and some written in Python. It's on my to-do list to learn Python. But there's a whole bunch of different modules in here and tons of stuff. So the way this is set up, this is a little bit of a for-profit group. So it's like they tease you. There might be 8 modules, and it's like the first 2 are free. And then if you want to finish the rest of them, you got to pay. It's not that expensive, though. And I think especially for students, they may have some discounts. Other places, there's a bunch of online learning just with the RStudio. So if you were there and downloaded the software, there's a ton of stuff at RStudio for online learning. There's videos, literally will walk you through every point and click. So I encourage you to take a look at that. UCLA, regardless of whether you decide you like R or not, the UCLA website is awesome. So it doesn't matter whether you're doing Stata, SAS, SPSS, R, etc. They have a ton of good information for anything you want to learn with statistics and processing. Swirl is another one. It's actually a package you install inside R. I think it was like a little add-on module, and it's really helpful. So you might play around with that. Another website, sometimes if you're out on Google and you just type in a question, like how do I do a t-test in R, 9 times out of 10, the first few links, you're going to get a link to this quick R website. And this is also really good just about statistics in general, but it's written specifically to show you how to do certain things using R, get the packages and so forth. So it has things here on the interface, input, management, basic stats, advanced stats, graphics. The other thing is this book right here. If you're really serious about learning R, I'd encourage you to get this book. Each chapter walks you through. He has examples, he has data sets, shows you what to do, what the interfaces look like, how to sort of interpret the results and so forth. So that's another really good resource. And feel free to stop me, ask questions, shout it out. Okay, so there's more things here, and then just to let you know, I'm not going to go through this, but this is actually copies of everything I did in the first 2 workshops this past spring. So everything's here. It shows you what to do in basic R Studio, and then there's some more information in this next series of things from the second workshop that I did. Okay. So the goal for today, like I said, is just to get you up to speed, talk a little bit more about what reproducible research and dynamic documentation is. But by the end, I'm hoping everybody walks out with having created their first document using RStudio, and we're going to definitely, everybody should be able to save it out to HTML and into a Word document. Just out of curiosity, how many of you guys decided to install a LaTeX engine, like MikTeX or MacTeX? All right. So for those of you that installed a LaTeX engine, there is a way to actually produce a PDF directly, but the way RStudio does that, it actually does its part inside RStudio, and then it'll call either MikTeX or MacTeX to create the PDF. It's kind of nice, and there's some neat things you can do with that, but I'll admit, learning R is hard enough. You don't want to add on top of that having to learn LaTeX, or LaTeX, depending on how you say that. I'm trying to avoid it myself, but I've learned enough now to sort of be dangerous. That said, if you can get it into Microsoft Word, you can make a PDF if you want. So it's not a huge stumbling block. It's just, anyway, if you installed it, we'll give it a shot and see how it works for people. Any questions? All right, we'll keep going. All right, so what is reproducible research? How many of you guys have at least heard that term? Well, you're going to hear it more and more. How about open science? All right. Dynamic documentation is a little bit specific to what we're doing here, but the whole concept of reproducible research is that there have been TED Talks on it. How many of you guys heard about the issue between Duke, MD Anderson, and well, anyway, I think I have a link for it here in a second. Okay, so this is going back a little ways. Depending on who you read, a lot of people attribute the term reproducible research to John Clairvaux in a thing he published in 1994, but it's basically about the idea that somebody else should be able to download your paper, look at what you did, reproduce or replicate your experiments, and get the same results. So obviously those of us that do a lot of stuff in sort of behavioral social science research, it's like really impossible to sometimes replicate those results. That said, even some of the bench science things where, you know, you're actually doing something with a culture in a petri dish, or you're working with strains of mice that are genetically pure, even in those situations, they were having problems replicating what people were doing. And so they basically came back and said, you know, like something I can't remember the exact numbers, but only like 20% or less of the published research out there in certain fields could really be reproduced. And it's not so much that what the person did originally was wrong, it was just, did we capture every single thing that happened? And sometimes I think one of the presentations I heard relative to, say, like cultures in Petri dishes, they didn't realize that even though, let's say, their warming oven or their incubator was set at, I don't know, pick a temperature, let's say 120 degrees, really it wasn't 120 degrees across the whole oven. It was like, well, the back of the oven was 150, the front of the oven was a little bit closer to 100. You know, so there's all of this kind of stuff that sometimes we can't document everything. So in a way, the lecture today is not so much about those pieces, but it's more to say, okay, once we've got the data, we need to have a workflow in place that says, okay, I've gotten my lab results back from the ACTSI. I've got all my survey forms back from here. Maybe there's another component coming from another database, and I've got all of those pieces and those data streams documented, and then I've got the code. I've got my text, and somebody should be able to go back and see exactly what I did and follow all of those steps. All right, so if you're interested, this article here, published in The Economist, talks about the misconduct that occurred, and some of it truly was misconduct. Like the PI that worked on this project actually he lied on his CV. I mean, there was a whole bunch of misconduct going on. But that said, the guys that worked on this at MD Anderson were interested, Dr. Baggerly and Dr. Coombs, they kept trying to reproduce this guy's results. And one of the first things that they did, and I don't know if it says it here, is a fantastic TED Talk that goes through all of this. So here's one. It says, another alleged error, they discovered a mismatch in a table that compared genes to gene expression data. The list of genes was shifted with respect to the expression data. And what's not told here? How many of you guys have ever pulled in data from Excel? Probably, yeah, most of you. I think one of the data sets had a header. The other data set didn't. So everything was literally off by one row, right? And they're matching these things up. Well, this was part of a cancer study trial. People were being randomized and given the wrong treatment because that original lookup table was off by one. So, you know, this was a serious issue, and this is a classic human error. I mean, aside from the fact that this guy sort of lied on his resume, that was another issue. But I mean, I've done that. And, you know, it's so easy. If you've ever cut and pasted and realized, oh, I pulled from the wrong column, or I pulled this from the wrong row, or if you're reading, results over here and you're trying to type it in, have you ever like accidentally tabbed over one space too many? It's so easy to do. So if you're interested, there's tons that's been written on this. Like I said, Dr. Baggerly, there's a fantastic hour-long TED Talk on this, especially any of you guys that are interested in the gene expression analysis. This whole movement, too, has now become a thing. There's a whole Center for Open Science. This is an international movement. You may be interested to read more on what they're doing. Where they're actually systematically taking different studies and literally trying to replicate what was done and see if they can reproduce the results. And if they can't, trying to figure out where the discrepancies lie. Is it just random variation? And so forth. So they have this whole fantastic framework and community, and you may be interested in that. The other thing is, this concept of having data that's reproducible is sort of becoming a norm, especially in the mathematical, computational sciences, physics. I've seen some journals in neurology, especially a lot of image processing. Anybody in here that works on any of the imaging data, voxel data. And in the Journal of Biostatistics, I'll just show you this. This is in their instructions to the authors. They actually have information where your article will actually get ranked. So if I scroll down here just a little bit, there's a statement here. It says, Our reproducible research policy for papers to the journal, they get, I'm not sure what kite marked means, they get a D if the data on which they're based is freely available. So that's sort of level 1. You get a C if the code is also available. And you get an R if both the data and the code are available and the associate editor for reproducibility can reproduce the results that is in your paper. That's now like the gold standard in the Journal of Biostatistics. I believe the associate editor for reproducibility, by the way, is Roger Ping, and he's up at Johns Hopkins.